everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made the staff for my Yuna cosplay. So I actually already had this cosplay. I got it from Easy Cosplay online and I wore it to a con a couple of years ago, but I never had the staff. And recently I decided that I do want to have the staff just to be able to take some cool pictures and things like that. But I wasn't trying to spend a whole fortune to get one, especially since I've already worn this to a con before. So I ended up making this for really cheap. I spent probably under $20 for all of the materials combined, and I'll drop a list of those materials in the description below for you guys. It's also pretty easy to make. It took me probably about 8 hours total, and all of the steps involved are totally beginner friendly. So any budget, any skill level, you can make a staff just like this. So let's get started. The first thing that I did is just draw out the design on a piece of cardboard, and to make the circles on the outside of the design I actually used some plates, that way they would come out perfectly circular. So just for reference, my largest plate is about 29 centimeters in diameter, so I just used those to sketch out the general circles first. Next, you'll see that I just used all kinds of objects to make the other smaller circles within the circular pattern. I used a roll of duct tape, I used a mug, I used an Amazon Alexa speaker, basically all kinds of circular objects that I had around my house. And I also used measuring tape just to make sure that I was getting everything centered or spaced equally, just based on a reference picture that I was going off of. After all the circular pieces were done, then I basically just used some measuring tape and a reference picture to carefully sketch out the rest of the design. I am honestly not artistic at all, so trust me, you can do this. Just take your time and don't worry if you mess something up. I messed up several of the lines multiple times and basically just drew them out again, and then I went over them in Sharpie once they were where I wanted them to be so that I could see where the correct lines were to cut out. And next was just filling in some of the smaller details of the design. Again, this was just using random items around the house to create circles. Next, I measured the space at the bottom where it's going to connect to the handle. For this, I basically just used some measuring tape and also a PVC pipe I had. I was actually originally going to use this PVC pipe as the handle, and then I ended up using something else, but it was about the same size, so it worked out. Once I was totally happy with the design that I had drawn out, I started to cut it out. I used a box cutter for most of it, and then for the finer parts of the design, like the smaller circles or the really small curvy lines, I used a smaller X-Acto knife. Once the design was totally cut out and I was happy with it, I moved on to tracing it onto a piece of white craft foam. I actually did this twice so that I would end up with 2 foam pieces in the shape of the design, and that way I could put one piece on each side. And once the design was drawn onto the foam, then I just cut it out using an X-Acto knife. Once I had both of the foam pieces cut out as well as my cardboard piece, I decided to start painting. So the first thing that I did was I gave it all a coat of white spray enamel. This was mostly for the cardboard just to brighten up the color a little bit so that the gold would show better, but I also ended up spraying it on the foam as well, just because why not? Next, I gave it all a coat of gold spray paint. I did spray paint the cardboard as well as the foam pieces. Even though the foam was going to be covering the cardboard, I wanted it all to be the same color just in case any pieces didn't match up perfectly and you could see through. That way it would all blend in. Once the paint was dry and I had all of my pieces ready, I used some rubber craft cement to attach the pieces of foam to both sides of the piece of cardboard. And once that was done, the design of the top was pretty much finished. And after that, I just went back in with an X-Acto knife and I cut off any excess pieces that you could see sort of overhanging from either side, just to make it look a little bit more neat. After that, I did just give it a coat all over with some Mod Podge. My thinking for this was that I wanted to kind of seal everything in, and I also wanted to stiffen up the foam a little bit just so that the foam wouldn't be quite so simple to damage if I accidentally caught my fingernail in it or something, because I've had that happen before where it's really easy to leave a dent in the foam. However, if I was doing this over again, I would skip this step. I would not use the Mod Podge because I found that when I did another coat of paint after this, it did not go on as evenly and it did not look as neat. I think just because that Mod Podge had created a little bit of texture on the surface. So, lesson learned, I would not use Mod Podge if you're planning to do more spray painting after that, which I was. Now, if you look at an image of Yuna's staff, you'll see that there's actually some little blue parts on the gold part on top. So next, I just blocked off where those parts would be using painter's tape, and I had already drawn these pieces out on the original design as well, so I knew where I wanted them to be. And after I sealed it all down with painter's tape, then I just went in with some blue acrylic paint and a small brush and brushed on the blue paint. After I painted on the blue, then I reversed the painter's tape, I covered up the blue part, and I gave it another coating of gold spray paint. As you can see, once I peeled off the painter's tape, the lines still weren't perfectly clean. I think because it was on a curve, it was really hard to get the tape totally flat and even, so I just touched it up with a paintbrush after that. And since the blue paint was kind of difficult, especially with the painter's tape situation, I only did that detail on one side. I guess I just got lazy. And here you can see what the design looks like once it was all painted. Next, I started working on the handle. This is just a plain wooden stick that I found at Home Depot in the cleaning section. It's supposed to attach to like a mop, but it was like $1.99, so I grabbed it. You could also use a PVC pipe or any other long stick-like object that you can find. So here I'm just measuring out how far I wanted the handle to extend into the top portion, and then I'm just marking that off with painter's tape, and that's the part that's going to be silver at the top there. And then I also marked some painter's tape on the other end for the portion that looks like it should be red, and then the entire middle of the handle is going to be blue. And again, I was able to eyeball all of that just by looking at a reference picture. So after I marked the segments off with tape, I just went out and spray painted the top portion to be silver, and next I used some acrylic paint to paint the entire middle section blue. The bottom of Yuna Staff is red, so I mixed a few different colors together to get the shade of red that I was looking for, and then just painted that on with a brush as well. After I finished painting those segments, I just used painter's tape again and spray painted the little gold areas on the bottom edge. And there you go, that's what the whole handle looked like after it was done. I wanted to add foam to the top of the handle on that silver part where it's going to connect to the design. So I just measured out a small piece of foam that would be big enough to wrap around and also about as tall as the silver piece. And then I just cut that out. After I had the piece cut out, I just tested it to make sure that it would fit correctly, and it did. So then I just spray painted that whole piece of foam to be silver. And there you go, that's what it looked like after it was painted and then just super glued on around the top of the pole. I think this just gives it a really clean, neat finish. Now both the handle and the top part are done, so it's time to attach them together. For this, I just used some super glue, and I made sure that the back seam on the silver foam piece was also matching up with the back of the design. That way that's the part that nobody sees. And after this, I also just folded in the very top of that silver piece, sort of folded it down so that it wouldn't show the pole inside, and I glued that down using super glue as well. And that's pretty much it. So after that last step, the only extra thing that I ended up doing was I actually added some duct tape here to secure the top of the staff to the handle, just because it is so thin, and with just the glue right there, it was a little bit wobbly. And then I just spray painted the duct tape so it's not quite as noticeable, but still the back obviously doesn't look super pretty. So I would say that's the only downside of the staff, is that it really only has one pretty functional side, but for a photo shoot or something, that's totally no big deal. And again, for the amount of money that I spent, I really don't mind. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please subscribe because I've got a lot more on the way. And if you end up making Yuna Staff, let me know. Post a photo and tag me on Instagram, or let me know in the comments below. That's all for now. Bye.